Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's yet another week of the Screen Sermon Podcast. It's the Boon! And I'm here with Inky.
Hey! It's me!
And also, we charged up the Sex Robotica Unit. SR, how you doing?
The Sex Robotica is ready for fucking, I don't know.
That's it. That's all we need.
Good night, everybody. End of that.
So, folks, we are back on the Alex Garland arc. I know that we took some weeks there. We did a VVV with The Ring and Ringu. We had a Coming Soon episode in there, but we are ready to get back and talking about Alex Garland again. So this is effectively Alex Garland episode 2. And so this week we are going to talk about his second directorial feature, which was 2018's Annihilation. I watched this. This would now be the third time I've seen this film, watching it for the show. And I've definitely gotten a little bit more out of it each time. It's certainly one that I think is rife for some unpacking. I did my own little Inky version of some research, and I'm looking forward to see if you had found some separate things. I looked into a couple of articles and also another YouTube channel, and kind of their takes on the show, on the film. So I'm excited to kind of drop some of those things that I found out in there and kind of see what you all thought of it. So I guess where I wanted to start is one of the things that I wanted to point out, or I figured it would be a good place to start, is I think there's a general consensus or a pretty decent majority out there that would consider this Alex Garland's kind of sophomore slump by comparison with Ex Machina, which of course got some Oscar buzz and is a generally well-regarded film. Annihilation isn't hated or disliked from what I've seen. It's more just not as universally praised or not as universally, I don't know, held on to as Ex Machina was. So what do you guys think? Would you consider this a sophomore slump for Alex Garland, or kind of in the same vein, or maybe you even like Annihilation better? What did you think?
I honestly wouldn't call it a slump at all. Like, just with these rewatches, I'd probably hold Ex Machina in slightly higher esteem. But, I mean, it's not a gigantic margin, honestly. I mean, I think he's moved into some new ideas. He's continued some from Ex Machina. And, yeah, I'd say his filmmaking was just as on par, as well as his writing.
What about you, SR?
I rate every movie that I watch, unless it's like a documentary or something. And I gave this a 9 out of 10, which is the same score I gave Ex Machina. So I love this. This is my first time watching it. He's 3 home runs for me. I like all 3 of his films, and we'll get into the other one later. But yeah, I don't think he's had a bad film to date.
Okay, so yeah, it sounds like for you guys it was a pretty relatively even race between the two. Not that you necessarily need to compare them against one another. I just know that people like to kind of take a director's body of work and they'll do, like, you know, tier lists and all this other stuff. So for me, I think I'm more similar to Inky, where I regard them kind of similarly, but I would probably say I preferred Ex Machina as a whole, for one reason or another. There was just something about the setup for that I appreciated a little bit more. But regardless, yeah, I've seen some thought processes out there about the fact that folks were thinking that Annihilation just kind of didn't live up to the hype that Alex Garland had built for himself after the release of Ex Machina. So just to give you folks a little rundown, I guess, if you hadn't seen the film, and obviously spoilers will abound during this conversation. Screen Sermon is a spoilerific podcast because we don't really cover anything that's new. So things have been out for sometimes decades that we cover, and usually at the bare minimum it's been a year or more. So basically what you have is a meteor strikes the Earth. From that meteor emanates this bizarre field that is what essentially the research team or this government agency is trying to explain what this field that it's emanating is. I mean, I guess, and it's affecting a certain area in the Florida Panhandle that they refer to as Area X. Our lead character, Lena, played by Natalie Portman, is a biologist. She has a husband who was part of one of the teams that went into the Shimmer, as they call it. I guess the border is called the Shimmer, but the inside of it's called Area X. He went into the Shimmer with a team, like a squadron of military folks. Most of them didn't return except her husband. Now she is going in as well to kind of solve this mystery, and this time it's an all-female team, mostly made up of scientists, and wacky stuff ensues from there. So this film certainly has some heavy melancholy to it, and there are certainly some themes around either grief or guilt. I've kind of heard a combo meal of the two, and it's based on a novel. So I don't know, like, what were the initial takeaways? Some of the off the cuff, top of your head kind of notes that you had about the film. And Inky, why don't you start?
Oh, sorry. I completely forgot my name. I realized I did the same thing when you were talking. You said I had more of the Inky reaction to this, and I was like, wait, what did Josh say? I'm like, oh, that was me. My bad. Okay, so first I saw this, I ended up seeing it in theaters when I was living out near Portland, Oregon, and
okay.
You know, big fan of Ex Machina and some of Alex Garland's written work before that, and I didn't realize kind of how lucky I was to actually have seen it in theaters, because it had a pretty short little run, and they just kind of dumped it on Netflix because the studio or the financiers, I forget which one, really lost faith in it. And but yeah, again, just loved it. It does a lot of things that I really dig in sci-fi and or horror, you know. And you can expand this out into other genres as well, as it makes an environment a huge component of the story, which I love, you know. Either explicitly like this one, or say more implicitly, like when it's set in a certain town and it may not be exactly about the town, but you know, take any New York movie from 1970 to 1990, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And actually, in anticipation of this episode, because I had read a lot of things like nonfiction, just random things by the author of the book, and had kind of been curious about the book for a long time. So I actually ended up reading the book for this, and initially thought, I kind of hustled the last week thinking that we were going to record this episode last week, and turned out I had an extra week worth of reading what is actually a pretty short book, but I'm also kind of a lazy reader. So, and I won't make this whole episode just that this is what the book did, this is what the movie did, but, you know, I will say there were some things that I definitely saw a bit differently having read the book.
And what about you, SR?
Yeah, I told you in the chat before that I like to curate what I watch, and I've done this well before Screen Sermon. I'd pick like a theme, and then find stuff related to the theme, and then group them together, and then watch them in like marathon, in a marathon way. And I had this for the longest time grouped in my killer plants category, but I knew nothing about it. I kind of assumed it would be something like the Ruins, which is a movie and book that I really enjoy, but I ended up getting something more akin to H.P. Lovecraft than anywhere close to that. So my first watch was a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the book kind of takes more of a central theme of grief, and the film kind of turns that on its ear a little bit and goes more in the direction of guilt as opposed to grief. So effectively, what I've kind of looked up or looked into as we come to find out, Lena, the main character, played by Natalie Portman, she ends up opting to go into Area X out of a sense of guilt, like she owes her husband Kane something, because the generally accepted theory is that Kane decided to undergo this dangerous mission because he was upset because he found out that Lena was having an affair with a colleague from work named Dan, I think. It's never explicitly stated that he finds out about the affair, other than Lena saying to Dan that he knows, but they never show how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Being
one difference I noticed too, like the movie leans a little bit more explicitly on self-destruction in certain ways. Like you see it in a few more characters. I would say the book's a little bit more focused strictly on. She doesn't have a name in the book; they're all just known by their titles. So she's just called the biologist, and she's the one telling the story. And so the way a lot of that and her relationship with her husband, it's doled out and a little bit more measured kind of a pace. You know what I mean? Not a pace, but a little bit more even measure, I guess. It wasn't one specific thing or just his absence that had kind of affected her. You see a little bit more of what their relationship was before.
So I didn't know it was a book until right before the episode, because I was looking up to see what the budget was and the box office gross, and it said underneath of it, this is an adaptation of the first book in a 3-book series, and I was like, oh shit. So yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, but Garland, I guess, was tapped to adapt it before the book was actually out, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's what I read too.
Yeah.
One thing that I like about this film is the amount of interpretations that can come from it. Because I heard one thing from Boon that I didn't pick up on. I did pick up on the self-destruction bit, but I didn't have as much into that meaning of the film as I'm sure you did. And before I get to my own, I listened to this one show on YouTube that does a biologist is explaining the different biological aspects of the stuff you see in video games and movies and TV shows. And he was describing how the theme that he got from the film was an allegory for the Garden of Eden. And I didn't pick up on that at all.
No.
I'll link, I'll send that video in the chat so you can do what you want with it, watch it, and add it to the YouTubes. But yeah, I didn't pick up on that at all. One thing that I wrote down is, to me, this movie read as if the shimmer was a metaphor for cancer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the route that I went with it. Being something that suddenly appears and destroys everything around it. That's what I got from it.
That was a review I had read as well. Kind of broke that down. I think it was on Collider. Just the mutations and the way that it, manipulates and kind of changes things, and the fact that she's also, researching cancer before she heads into the shimmer.
I picked up on it because there was a lot of specific mentioning of cells and how cells work. With that foreshadowing of her being a biologist and her original lecture on cells, that's what originally made me take it in that direction.
And I think it's an interesting take to look at it from this angle of a representation of cancer too, because they explicitly say that the shimmer effectively is about change, and that people are about self-destruction because it's what's encoded into us, right? And so the shimmer isn't necessarily about destroying or killing, it's more about changing. It's more about alteration or recombining things together. And one of the other things that I thought was interesting was in the book, the lighthouse may exist. I'm not 100% sure, but I know for sure there is a tower and a tunnel. And that in the tunnel, there are words written along the walls of a spiraling staircase that descends downward. And so the imagery of that, the spiraling words coming down a staircase, very much like the helix of DNA. And then if you think about the outside of Area X, the shimmer, the border is this amorphous kind of blob shape. And so you can think of the entire thing of Area X as being a cell, with, the DNA at its center. And that I can attribute to Alt-Shift-X's YouTube channel, which I will certainly link to this video. He does a lot of breakdowns of films and shows. Specifically, he has a long-running series about Game of Thrones and now House of the Dragon. And I just thought that was an incredible thought process, that Area X itself is the shape of an animal cell. And so the idea that, cells are built essentially to divide and to duplicate one another and to continue to grow and things like that. So I would have never thought to consider it about cancer, because to me it more seemed about creating and duplicating and recombining things in a different way and changing. So it was more about change than it was about death and destruction, from what I was seeing.
And another route you could take with that, if we want to overanalyze it, is you could take the spiral staircase to also represent somebody's mental spiral into self-destruction, which is another theme that Inky mentioned that I also caught on to.
Yeah, the spiral aspect of it is key to me. A little bit more so in the film, honestly. I mean, it's kind of a disintegration story. I mean, that's not like a proper, story structure or anything, but it's one that I kind of find interesting, even if it's, at times quite depressing, when you just kind of keep seeing people get picked off, or even just your main characters themselves are just sort of descending gradually, almost a Dante's Inferno of sorts. Although I'd say that part of it's a little bit up for debate, considering that, I feel both of what you're saying, the cancer or to the growth area of it. And again, cancer is in its own way kind of a growth. The other aspect of it too, and I think somebody mentions this inevitable destruction in us, is just the idea of entropy, which is something I hadn't thought about in quite a while.
Okay, so getting back to it, and I apologize, folks, for the weird edit hack job that you might be experiencing. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty, more than likely from my crappy computer. Inky, I wanted to get back to the comment that you made about it being like entropy. And for the uninitiated, specifically myself, can you break that down a little bit more for me so that I understand what you mean?
So it's a concept, I believe, in physics. Let me look it up just to make sure I don't fuck it up. Yeah, okay. In physics, a thermodynamic quality representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. A shorter version is a lack of order or predictability and a gradual decline into disorder.
Okay. I see what you... Okay.
The shit done got fucked up.
Yes. Right. That's actually the third definition. Weirdly, yeah, verbatim.
It's the Urban Dictionary.
Yeah. But yeah, it's sort of the universe's natural inclination, or at least the things in it, since we are all energy and matter, to head towards disorder, chaos, as you will.
Okay. And I guess that is reflected in what we see within Area X as things are recombining and changing and mutating and things like that. They appear to be doing so at random. So there is no real order. There is nothing that you can predict about what's going to happen to your body or the bodies of animals. As we see them encounter animals and plant life that don't make any sense and things like that.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because we were saying this just before we kind of got cut off, but I sort of see between both your guys' view. I lean a little bit more towards yours, that I don't see it as directly about disintegration or death. I mean, that idea of entropy, we're all eventually going to be that, not to be too Lion King about it, but at some point these meat husks of ours are gonna, shut down, and they're just gonna, what's left of it is just going to eventually break down into something else. But also, yeah, I mean,
Right.
when you see the, if you want to call them mutations or adaptations or whatever else the animals and plant life have taken on, I mean, they're not natural to our eyes, you know, but then again, neither would say what a reptile looked like 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, you know what I mean? So in some ways, you could almost see these as like spastic, sped up evolutions of sorts, even though I can't say what they, the exact reasoning why a tree turns into crystals, but you know, besides being fucking cool to look at, you know.
And I took the crystalline like trees when she reaches the coast near the lighthouse. I took that as the trees and plant life interacting with the sand. Because, right, like, what would you do? Like, what's the whole thing about, like, if lightning strikes the sand, it turns to glass and stuff like that? So I kind of took that to mean when the plant life is crossing over with the sand, it creates these crystalline, like, trees dotted around the landscape close to the lighthouse, which I thought was a very cool image.
That was one of my favorite images in the whole thing.
I noticed a running theme of refraction going on in the film. Even the first scene, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say foreshadow or anything, but you see a little bit of that because Lena and Kane are holding hands, and it's done behind a glass of water, and you see that essentially that scene again later in the film, and colors are refracted like throughout the entire time spent in the shimmer even. Yeah. And
there's a consistent rainbow hanging in the mist in the air or on the surface of the water when they're canoeing across the water and stuff. You can see almost like there's like oil on the surface of the water and stuff.
Right. And with that, I mean, we could get into the VFX behind it.
Sure. Yeah,
because
go for it.
While I have issues with certain instances in the film, I do think all in all the VFX are pretty good. I like that they take the multicoloredness and light, which we normally take as something safe, and they turn it into something more sinister, even though I would argue the shimmer is a more neutral entity rather than a malevolent one, or benevolent one,
sure.
rather. I think it's interesting that they take a common trope and turn it on its head, because whenever you see for lack of a better word, the shimmer of the shimmer in things, there's that layer of unease behind it, like in their eyes at the end and throughout.
Yeah, and I was going to say,
I think there's something to be said about the neutral piece as well, because like even Lena was talking about the entity that she encounters in the lighthouse. When B.D. Wong's character is interrogating her essentially about her experience within, he's making it sound like she was attacked, and she has to reiterate the point, like, oh no, it wasn't trying to hurt me, it was just copying what I was doing.
Which plays into the self-destruction aspect very nicely, the way that he was hurt by her double via her own actions being copied, ending in her being injured. I thought that was a really brilliant way to go about that.
Yeah, there's a whole other school of thought to look into that last part with the doppelganger between her and her husband and all that. If anybody knows, like Carl Jung, the psychologist, and his idea of the shadow, one of the first reviews I watched or read about this back in the day when I first saw it, and the guy admitted, he said, I was too dumb to know this, but his wife apparently pointed it out to him. So shout out to this reviewer whose name I don't remember, his wife. But and reading a little bit about that, just the general idea of the shadow yesterday, I could definitely see that. It tends to be like impulses that we or maybe the society around us kind of deem as dark or, malevolent. And we tend to just kind of repress them. And they oftentimes come out in different ways, whether it's projections, resentments, all kinds of different things. So yeah, you could read some of that as being our self-destructive side, because it's the part that we are, in some ways, even subconsciously, a little bit ashamed of.
SR? I was afraid to jump in there. I don't want to cut anybody off.
No, we're good.
Okay.
It was another instance for me of that. Especially since all the characters essentially were left with, nothing left to lose. Having their own issues, whether it be previous trauma or current trauma or cancer in Ventress's case. The only one that seemed to be the odd one out there was Lena. But
yeah,
come to find out, mind you, she's the one that walked away from all of this also.
Right.
Then we come to find out the whole thing with the affair, the cheating, and the husband, and him being dead, and the not dead one of him is not him.
That's actually, that's worth noting is that come the client, at the end of this film, we're kind of led to believe that like the shimmer has been dissipated and the entity has been destroyed, but that's not necessarily true. This alien entity, this alien body, or this alien presence that is on Earth persists on, because even though the entity that was the doppelganger of Lena was destroyed by a phosphorus grenade and then the shimmer effectively dissipated after the lighthouse burned down, the doppelganger version of Kane is the one that survived because her Kane committed suicide. And so, like, what are the implications there? And, like, what does that mean? Does it mean anything, I guess? Because what...
The shimmer is in remission.
Ooh.
Oh,
I like it. Okay, so we're back to the shimmer is cancer thing. But I like that. That's good.
well, and I had to. I wish I would have watched more closely. I did read a short article about the ending of that, and there may have been a very quick and hard to notice kind of switcheroo between Lena and the doppelganger, and that it was actually the real Lena that we saw get flame grenaded.
I think it's supposed to be ambiguous, though.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the majority of it is, and that's why it brings up so many things as we're all talking about now. Part of why I love it too, because it works very much on that level of making the audience itself ask a lot of different questions and not quite answering them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also when you can just simply enjoy, for the aesthetic value, everything we were talking about with the effects. Like, I fucking love all the natural psychedelia of this, and then it gets these crazy shoehorns of like just disturbing horror, physical and otherwise. Yeah. I'll say, going back just a tad to one of SR's points about how we see how they all take to being in the shimmer, I would say that Tessa Thompson's character Josie, the physicist, we definitely see a different path for her. She seems to almost accept the shimmer itself as she kind of grows into things. I know I mentioned this a few episodes back. I forget what the movie was, but maybe it was just Swamp Thing had a big impression on me. But I'm always just like weirdly tickled by seeing people grow into plants and just become plant people. I have no idea why. Mm-hmm. but it's just something that really just intrigues me. And also it doesn't hurt that it's Tessa Thompson, who I just like love to death.
Yeah. Well, and
Go ahead.
Go ahead, SR.
I thought, regardless of whether that's the real or Lena or not, and my personal interpretation would be it's not, given that at the setup of the film she acts the way the not real Kane did. Anyway, I would argue even if that is the real Lena, while during her time in the shimmer she would have experienced the same type of mutations that plenty of the other things that were in the shimmer did, because the shimmer has a way of combining things together, such as somehow an alligator with maybe a shark, the people with the shrubs, the bear with the consciousness of Shepherd, who it was, if you notice, her throat was ripped out, and then the bear ended up getting her voice.
Yes.
So maybe it absorbed that part of her consciousness. But then also, there's a scene where Anya's tattoo is on Lena, so she essentially absorbed that aspect of her. So regardless, and you see that based on the shimmer effect in her eyes, she, whether it's the real Lena or not, she came out of it changed by her time spent inside of it.
Yeah. And there was also a concept behind, the tattoo that you had mentioned is also interesting because of the idea of self-destruction. It's the Ouroboros, so it's the snake eating its own tail, so it's effectively destroying itself, tying into that theme even more. But I had another point. And I just lost it. I think one of the things that I took away from one of the criticisms, I guess, that I saw, which will be one of the articles that I linked to this video, it's from Tor.com, and it was written by Lena Schnelbach. She actually has 2 articles about this film that I kind of wanted to touch upon. One of the things that she talks about is how clunky of a scene it was when the exposition is given as to why all the characters are here. Because it's so unnecessary, like it's so ham-fisted. Essentially, they're rowing in a canoe, and she just basically points at each character and is like, this is why she's here, this is why she's here, this is why she's here. You know, it's like, this one cuts herself, this one is an addict, I lost my daughter, and, you know, we don't know why Ventress is here, but of course we eventually find out that she has cancer. And so they're all confused about Lena because she lied about the fact that Kane was her husband. So it was just an unnecessary thing where you could have easily had Shepard's character pay specific attention to the little bear keychain that was on her backpack, which is clearly a sign that that's her daughter's toy that's left behind, and she takes it with her everywhere. There's things that you could have done about Josie's characterization and making sure that, like, at one point in the film she takes a shirt off or pulls her sleeves up or something like that, and you get this like Lena looking at the scars on her arm so the camera can focus on it without having to say it, and then I think the audience would understand it. I think that that was just one of those moments where it's like you're treating the audience like it's stupid, and as what I would like to believe anyway, a non-stupid audience member, you could have introduced these characterizations, or you could have introduced these motivations for these characters in a little bit more of an elegant way, and I would have really appreciated that. And just kind of accepted it about their characters, rather than having to be told, like, this is this person, this is that person, this is that person. Because now you're not a character anymore. Or now you're not a person anymore, you're the addict. Yeah, and it's like, I didn't need that. And part of what she talks about in one of her articles is how one of the strengths of the book is that it is, these people are here to do a job. Like, this is a biologist, this is an anthropologist, this is a psychologist, etc., etc. And so they, like, their work comes first, and it's not so much about these, like, the underlying reasons kind of come to the surface a little more naturally than just being kind of spewed out.
I think. I think.
I was gonna say.
God damn it!
Go ahead, Inky. Let Inky go.
Well, a couple quick things. If I remember right in the book, they're not supposed to know each other's names. It's kind of a Reservoir Dog situation.
Okay.
And I hear what you're saying too with because the conversation at the kind of like picnic table out on the deck of Southern Reach or what have you felt a little bit that way myself. You know, I mean, and granted, it's not necessarily the movie's fault that I've seen so many movies do this. You know, any kind of team up, especially military team up, you have these moments. You know, oh really? You're from Alabama? This guy's from Chicago. This guy's from Buffalo. This guy's from California. You know, and of course the Californian guy's got, you know, longer blonde hair and all that bullshit. But yeah, that, like, it's well worn because it does kind of work. But I hear what you're saying about those. They felt a little bit forced for what is otherwise a much more subtle film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that that's a fair criticism to have. But it's interesting that it does that, because I feel like there's a lot of other stuff that it lets the audience figure out. But yeah, that was pretty ham-fisted in there. Like it's real good with setting up small details that'll come about later, and maybe it tried to just not have too many cooks and just lay it out there so there wasn't too much to look into. Because the first thing that comes to mind is we get this weird dialogue between Lena and Dan, I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
Where she's like, I'm just gonna paint the bedroom, and he's like, oh, well, it's not cheating to just go to a cookout or whatever. And then we come to find out later that she had an affair with him.
Yeah.
It's moments like that which make me wonder why they decided to just put that out there instead of letting the audience figure it out for themselves, when it's so good at adding little details throughout like the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Well,
when I feel like a lot of the dialogue, as Inky said, is understated or unsaid. It's implied, and you're kind of supposed to infer it through body language or through subtle cues and things like that. So just having a scene like that, or even the one with Dan, any of these instances where they're just so overt about just telling you something in a film where they don't just tell you things, it was really weird.
Yeah, and I mean, the choice of the affair, if you want to call it that, was a little bit too high flying of a flag for me. Like to both your points. I mean, like I didn't necessarily need to know that exact thing, and I mean, for all she knew that her husband was dead, so the worst she did was be with a guy who was also still married and whose wife was very much alive. Actually, one line that really struck me odd. He's trying to like reassure her, this colleague that she's had the little tryst with, and he says about his wife, she's blameless in this, and you're like,
yeah,
like well no shit. I don't think she was blaming your wife, dog.
Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up, because that's the one scene I pointed out when I watched this with my wife. It didn't make any sense to say there. Like, we haven't met this character, and we won't meet this character. Why would you, if you're... I don't know. It didn't make sense for that line to be there.
Yeah. Just in a film of, like I said, in a film of unsaid things, I think that when the moments of this film where I'm like, I just don't feel like it's quite reaching the heights that Ex Machina did, I think it's those moments where it kind of goes against itself, where it's just, of all the things this film doesn't need to say, because it's telling me without telling me. And then when it goes out of its way to tell me something, it's so jarring, and it just seems so unnecessary that's what's pulling me out. And yeah, that was definitely, I hadn't even thought about that coming in. I was gonna point out the whole let me introduce you to the team kind of speech, but that's a really good point too, is that some of the conversations with Dan around the affair and stuff like that just seemed really bizarre. Well, one of the things that I was not pissed about, but one of the things that I was waiting for was the scene where they had more of a specific interaction where Kane found out that there was an affair going on, and that scene never happens, and I could have swore that it did. And the closest thing that you really come to it is the when he's leaving, when he's shoving off to the Area X mission, and he's just so morose in that scene when he's saying goodbye. Like, he doesn't kiss her, he can barely look at her really, and it's like, so he clearly already knows, but we never really see him find out.
Oh, see, that's a time difference, I guess, that I made up in my own head. I assumed that the affair happened after he'd already gone to Area X.
No, I think that there was a motivator for her wanting to go, because she felt guilty that the Shimmer shit happened to him because he left to get away from her for cheating.
Yeah, that's what I took from it as well.
Oh, okay.
And that the affair effectively happened while he was away on a different mission, because he is consistently away from home. And like, she's kind of a lonely... After she got out of the military, she's home while he continues to go off on different deployments, and so she was lonely and ended up sleeping with a colleague.
Well, Okay, yeah, that definitely changes my view of it now. I didn't pick up on that. There was one more like editing thing where I thought like the time just felt a little bit odd when Oscar Isaac's character returns. I mean, it feels like he's back for all of about a half hour, and then like the Men in Black come to get him, and it just felt really odd to me. Like they let him get back there for barely even an evening, and then they're like, "Quick, go get that fucking guy."
Yeah. The editing, I do think, is a little fucky in this movie because they do try to tell it out of order. Like, it's an incredibly cold open, and it's after the events of the thing have already happened, and we're having the interrogation with B.D. Wong's character and stuff. And that's obviously a setting that we come back to multiple times as we're kind of checking in with Natalie Portman in the present time. But yeah, it is really jarring sometimes the way that they do that, to the point where you're like, I don't know where this fits in. I don't know where this is in the timeline.
I didn't have as much. I didn't have as much trouble with that, and I thought that it was really neat having the story setup of the film be disorienting, because it would be like sort of like the audience is a participant in the film, because of that's what happens to the people who enter the Shimmer. So I thought that plot structure was pretty neat. I can see how it would be a pain in the ass, though.
Oh, no doubt. Something I hadn't even keyed into, and I mean, it feels more apparent in a book where it is the entire thing is first person. But there's an article on Decider about like what the end may or may not have meant, and that's where I had the other thing before about if there was some kind of a switcheroo at the end with the doppelganger. But the writer points out that at least everything in the Shimmer, that part of the story, is being told by Lena, and this kind of compromised version of Lena. So that can account a little bit for why some, like, maybe some parts don't add up as well, or it is a little bit more, you know what I mean?
A little
serving in some
narrator situation.
Yeah, exactly.
I hadn't even considered that that's not her. That didn't even cross my mind. I don't know why.
Yeah, I took it as it being her doppelganger, with her having died in the Shimmer.
Right. But why? Like, why did she just hold that fucking phosphorus grenade? She knew what was going to happen.
I think it's meant to be discussed.
I was going to say ... self-destruction?
Annihilation.
Yeah, exactly.
And another thing I wanted to point out, and I think it's actually very pertinent in that last scene, the score of this film I thought was really effective. It was one of the takeaways that I had from it. It's such a small score. There's only a couple of pieces in it. There's only a couple of songs or whatever, or orchestral pieces. But I thought that the way that they used music to kind of key into specific things was really effective, especially at the end, because a lot of what you have going on is like acoustic guitar, very melancholy kind of songs throughout the course of the film. And then at the end, when Ventress effectively disintegrates or is annihilated, and the kind of amorphous entity spews forth from her body, that fucking synth song that just starts playing as their interaction starts, and it plays over effectively the entire dance with the doppelganger that Lena has. I thought that was very effective, especially because we hadn't heard any sounds like that throughout the entire film, which just tells you like we're somewhere else now. Like this is a completely otherworldly situation we're in. And I just thought the use of sound and music was really effective in this film, enough that I actually made notes about it, where it's usually something I ignore unless it's really bad.
Yeah, no, shout out to Ben Salisbury and Jeff Barrow, who returned from Ex Machina.
I forget, did I praise it in Ex Machina too? Maybe that's just something I like about...
I believe so.
I might just really like their work.
Well, another thing is that the way it like picks up right at the climax, it gives itself more to, as we're seeing what is the closest thing that we could see in the film as like the embodiment of the Shimmer, the entity itself being this Lovecraftian abomination of random bullshit that looks like a fucking Salvador Dali painting. Yeah.
I thought it looked like a Tool video.
Yeah, it's that shit that plays on your computer screen when you put a CD in.
Yeah, it's the old, what was that thing on the original PlayStation? Boon probably remembers this, where you could throw a CD in and it would make these crazy shapes and colors.
Yeah, like the sound mix thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going for, the fucking video player.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, Windows Media will do it too, or it used to anyway, when you would play a song through Windows Media Player, it would do the crazy, like, shapes that just kind of fly around.
Oh, I love that. I fell into a jag the other day. I ended up just watching a YouTube video of the game Hyperzone.
I've never heard of it.
Nintendo. It's a fun watch, too, again, if you're just really killing time before you go to sleep, because it's just, like, the whole game is just Mode 7. Like, it's just Mode 7, shapes and colors, the game.
Nice.
But has a banging soundtrack, too, so.
I mean, that makes a big difference between a piece of garbage or a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out the other article that I read from Tor.com by Lena Schnelbach. She talked about, she wrote these kind of back to back. It was after her initial viewing of the film, and then after she had some time to think about it a little more. And so the initial article is spoiler free, and then the second one really kind of digs into some spoiler territory. So she specifically was talking about Josie's character and how her experience within Area X was actually kind of inspiring or kind of beautiful. And the conclusion that she comes to is that Josie, as the physicist who is the one who hurts herself in order to feel alive, you know, she cuts herself, or did. She's the one that decides, well, first of all, she figures out what the shimmer is doing, that anything that enters the shimmer is refracted and changed and morphed and recombined with other things, and that's just the way that it operates. That's the way that it functions. And so after she not only comes to the conclusion that the rest of the scientists were looking for in terms of what is it, you know, what is this thing and why is it here and all this other stuff, so they don't really know why it's here or what it wants, because one of the things that they talk about is the entity at the end of the film. I'm not even sure that it did want anything, and I thought that was pretty pertinent. Like, I couldn't figure out what the hell it was trying to do other than to assimilate or, like, become Natalie Portman, and then what? Like, what is it going to do? But they were talking about how Josie's character, she had this profound moment where she's effectively like, Ventress wants to find this lighthouse, or like this, or some kind of reason behind this whole thing, and Lena wants to fight against it. And I don't want either of those things. Like, I'm not interested in doing either of those things. And you can tell from the start of the film that she's kind of taken by these, the plant life. When they discover, when they come upon the abandoned boathouse thing where the albino alligator ends up attacking, one of the first things they see along the dock is this plant life that is all these different species of flowers, but they're growing out of the same, like, root system. So they've effectively become the same plant, even though it's different species. And that's when they first started noticing that things are really going wild with the plant life. And Josie seems taken by it. I mean, she seems very much interested in it, and she even mentions, like, oh, it's like they're setting up for a wedding because of the way that it's kind of bordering the dock that they're walking on. And then later on, when they find the humanoid shaped plant life, and they talk about how it would have human Hox genes in it, which effectively define our physical structure, further just bringing up this whole thing, like, that is a plant and with some human DNA, and that's why they grow like that, because of that reason. So she seems very taken by the plant life, and somehow or another decides that this is a worthy end, or a worthy path for her to take that she walks away from the whole ordeal, walks away from Lena, and effectively disappears. We have no idea exactly what happens to her, but it's heavily implied that she just becomes one of those humanoid plants. And I don't know how she can just decide to do that. I have no idea how she can just choose to alter her form. But they were just, Lena Schnelbach was effectively saying, like, she took control of her own future in this world of hers where she's a black woman who is in a white-dominated field, being a physicist. She clearly had a history of abusing herself in order to feel alive and all these other things. And so there was a lot of things in her life that felt out of control. She was feeling some level of depression we're sure of that. There may or may not have been a suicide attempt. And effectively, she just decides, I'm not going to fight against this. I'm not going to destroy myself. I'm not going to, help you find this thing that I really don't care if you find it or you don't find it. I'm going to go my own path and make this decision about my own future, and just basically accepts peace because that's what she wants. And I thought that was a really cool takeaway. I thought it was a really cool takeaway about Josie's character, that I would say almost she's the only one that wins in this whole thing.
I have a note that I thought was going to go somewhere, but it didn't, at least that I noticed. That many of the characters that we see in the film, upon their deaths, they seem extremely at peace when they die. You have Josie Ventress, because she seems fine. Kane, when he's about to kill himself, he doesn't seem in distress to me. And even the guy that he cut open with the one of the few points of what I consider bad VFX, with the insides or roots or whatever's inside of him crawling around, everyone seems calm. And this is with two exceptions. Anya and the other one.
and Shepard.
Yeah.
Or the other one.
Both of which were mauled by the bear.
Right.
With
hard to be at peace when that's how you're dying.
So I was wondering how exactly to interpret that, and I thought that I was going to get an answer for it, and there's nothing that I could see. But I did make a note of that when I was watching it, because I thought it was an interesting little tidbit.
Inky?
Yeah, speaking of the bear, and actually the visual effects in general, I mentioned earlier, I know Salisbury and Barrow came back for the music. Rob Hardy, the cinematographer, was also back from Ex Machina, and we also had Andrew Whitehurst on VFX. I'd say really interesting read. I did a bad job of research because I basically almost pasted the entire article, but it was that damn good. But yeah, it's a really good interview with Whitehurst on The Verge. It's got a really long title. It's How Annihilation's visual effects artist created those terrifying mutant creatures. Rolls right off the tongue. But no, like a really great interview. And what really struck me in that the scream bear and those trees at the end, a lot of the creature effects were really evolved from initial idea, and even as they were making the movie, kind of not just like learning how things would read on camera, but also how they would build it and making different choices along the way, which was really interesting, and mirrored a handful of things as you see in the movie, since it is a story about, it's an A to B in some sense, but again, you also see these different changes happening within the characters and without, So I thought that was kind of an interesting mirror, the effect that this process had, well, not the effect, but the kind of relationship of this process to what we're seeing in the film. But yeah, Whitehurst, I thought, knocked it out of the park on this one. I mean, the Scream Bear is one of my favorite things I've seen in any kind of movie, like horror, sci-fi, or otherwise. I mean, I remember saying that the first time I saw it, like, how the fuck have I not seen that before? It's so good. It had to have happened before this, but I mean, I couldn't remember anywhere I had seen it.
Yeah, the bear is one of the two things I picked out as far as VFX that I did have an issue with.
Oh yeah?
How so?
Because there are scenes when the bear is close up, when it's essentially mauling both of the two women, where it looks fine. It looks like maybe an animatronic was used. But if that's VFX, it's fine. But when you see the bear's like full body and far away, it starts looking shitty. In fact, the whole precursor to the attack scene, I thought, you know, it wasn't done great. It sort of looked pasted in. Like you could tell that it wasn't real. But then when you get more close-up scenes and action shots, it's fine. But when like the jaw was torn off, you could see some very clearly CGI blood splatter and everything.
Yeah.
And it was that sequence that it flip-flopped between, oh, this is decent and that looks like shit, like over and over again until essentially the scene was over. But then you have shit like the alligator, shark, crocodile, demon creature, which is my next gimmick name.
That's a Yu-Gi-Oh card if I ever heard one.
that looked awesome.
Yeah. Go use Rescue Rabbit to find that fucker.
I'm gonna make Boon type that every goddamn day. Yeah, but that creature, that looked great. But like I said, there are parts with the bear that I thought was like very clearly computer generated.
And I thought the bear was, I mean, I don't think I thought too much about the VFX except for like the jaw rip scene, because that one definitely rang as like, okay, they didn't make like a fake head and rip the jaw off of it or something like that. Like that was very clearly visual effects. The attack leading up to that was very harrowing, and it kind of hard to watch. Similar to like Leo DiCaprio's attack in The Revenant, but a little more, short, less drawn out, and things like that. It was just very much the bear had an agenda, which I thought I thought the Scream Bear was terrifying because it wasn't there to eat people. It was just there to kill people. Like, it dragged Shepard away and tore her throat out, but her body wasn't consumed in any way. And then it basically stalked them back to this neighborhood where they were holing up for the night. Which, by the way, the house that they were holed up in, I also got this from the Alt-Shift-X video, is a carbon copy of Lena and Kane's house from the rest of the film. So that's another way that the shimmer is continuing to change and alter things. It created a doppelganger of their home. And like this bear clearly followed them there. And then at first I thought it was like a predatory tactic, that it had somehow or another like Mega Man Shepard's voice so that it could draw out her friends. And then the more I thought about it, or the more I thought about how the nature is being warped by the shimmer, it was like, no, I don't think the bear did this on purpose. It was just, it assimilated part of Shepard's consciousness when it killed her, which is actually aped later on by, well, not aped, I guess, but actually Josie kind of confirms that later. Like, imagine you're being killed, this bear is killing you, and the last part of you that's gonna live on is this, your voice basically living inside this bear now. The sounds that it makes are the sounds of you dying, and like that's the last part of you that gets to live on, and how horrible is that? And I think that was another thing that kind of contributed to her making this decision of like, I'm just going to become one with the plants, and that's just going to be the rest of my existence.
I just want to say that the bear had an agenda is one of my new favorite sentences. Also, here's my like very cynical take on why it looked like their house. Like, it's Florida. It's probably just a fucking track home. They all look the same.
So, I don't know. What other notes or things am I not thinking to point out that you guys wanted to bring up? I don't want to cut anyone off. But as I'm kind of going through my notes, I've kind of thrown all my fun stuff out there. So I want to hear what else you have, or if you have nothing, we can call it a show.
One final interpretation is that the shimmer was destroyed because it let itself be destroyed. Given that
how so?
It can continue to exist within both Kane and Lena and then still spread in its own way, with them getting back together and reproducing and having children who will also have the shimmer within them.
All right.
Shimmer children. I like that. Yeah, it feels almost like
Shimmer kids.
Shimmer kids.
Children.
Hey, Shimmer Kids is my tag team name.
Oh, damn it. I was going to say, it sounds like you and another white guy are dressed up in 80s rap gear.
Everything is sequenced. Even the underwear. It causes me constant pain.
And you probably end up ruining them anyways. I'm just... No, that's a really cool take on it, honestly. I like that, because it does, when you say it that way, remind me a little bit of the end of The Thing.
Well, and I mean, don't they now have the capacity? So what we're led to believe, and the end is a little bit weird, and what happens with Ventress is a little bit strange, because what happened to her, right? Did she become assimilated by the entity? Because when we first check in with her, when we're in the basement of, not the basement, where the crater is inside of the lighthouse, that H.R. Geiger kind of setup that they have down there, she's sitting there, speaking very poetically, and I didn't get much out of what she was saying. I wasn't picking up on what she was saying, but it looked like she had no eyes.
Right.
Which we see later on when the doppelganger takes on Lena's form. It's the face builds itself very slowly, and so there's a period of time where you basically see a Natalie Portman looking face but without eyes. So it looked like the entity somehow absorbed or something. Like, where did Ventress go? The entity was becoming Ventress, but then all of a sudden it spewed the amorphous entity out after Lena's blood entered it. And so that whole thing got weird. So wouldn't that be another thing where entity Kane or doppelganger Kane could effectively just take in somebody else's blood and then... Or I guess it was the other way around. It was Ventress for some reason falls apart and becomes the amorphous blob, which then takes in Lena's blood, and then it became the doppelganger form of Lena over time. Couldn't Kane just spew the amorphous blob thing back out and then assimilate somebody else? But I guess that's not really reproducing, it's just becoming a different person.
Yeah, and they both seem a little bit new to the world, so to speak. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. These shimmered versions of both of them. They're a little bit confused. They're not quite sure what they are.
Right.
So I'm not sure.
What about you, SR? Any kind of take from all that nonsense I just said?
I was trying to think, because her whole motivation was, I want to see what the fuck's up at the lighthouse before, and I mean, she did. Her goal was done.
She sure did.
And then she was like, well, that's all I wanted, and fucked off into Shimmerland.
Yeah, but where did she go?
Maybe she, much like Josie, maybe she just sort of gave up and was like, okay, well, I've fulfilled my purpose, goodbye.
Okay, that's a fair point, because we literally had another character in the film that just disappeared. So yeah, maybe Ventress did the same thing and became part of the fucking walls down there or something. I don't know.
I mean, with one of her other motivations, beating the cancer, I think once she got in there and she saw fucking tree people and bears with human skulls growing out of them, and there's a with Kane's dead body and everything, how it's essentially grown into a plant, which, by the way, I thought looked like the layout of the human nervous system. But I didn't have anywhere to
I didn't pick up on that.
I think with her seeing what types of mutations the shimmer causes, she looks at it and goes, well, this isn't healing, this is destructive. So this isn't getting beat. I wanted to go to the lighthouse. I made it to the lighthouse, so this is the end. And she gives in to the shimmer, because I feel like all the characters have the ability to essentially let themselves go and let it take over and it do what it will.
Right.
Which is why the animals are probably affected and the plants and everything, because they don't have the same consciousness as a human, so they don't really have the same ability to like fight back and prevent the mutation.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had going back to your earlier question, Boon, maybe like 2 last things to kind of wrap up.
Sure.
So the last one is just this is a constant debate about why cosmic horror works better on the page than on the screen, because generally the idea is that when you show something, it kind of takes away from that ominous sort of mysterious terror of it, which I do get.
Sure.
There are some stories that just can't work on screen, at least not in the same way. YouTube channel called Screened cover this pretty well. Screened, ED at the end there, called Why the Cosmic Horror is Hard to Make. And I think this one is an example of a great way of doing it, because it does give you that kind of, it points towards things, existential, and it gives you these different, like, this almost kind of funhouse sort of experience with it. You don't know why this is happening, what exactly is happening, but you know it's fucked up, and you're wondering what will happen next to either those characters, or if you're able to transport yourself in the movie, what could possibly happen to you in this kind of place.
Right.
So he was talking about 2 other films, Bird Box and The Thing, but I feel like these applied fairly well to Annihilation, which were vague and ominous and do not take away from the mystery. And the other was, by the end we still don't know what the true form is. The unnameable, it can't be pinned down to one thing. And the shimmer and its effects felt like both of those to me. So I give Alex Garland and company quite a bit of credit, because, yeah, the cosmic or Lovecraftian style horror, a lot of times it just sort of either, just goes straight for the tentacle, which is always a little bit like, not all of the Eldritch gods had tentacles. I think it was just Cthulhu, but also, yeah, it's like when you actually just see the monster, a lot of times you're like, what? That's it? Oh fuck,
Yeah.
That's
the Cloverfield.
So yeah, I actually don't mind the look of that monster. So I'm kind of in the minority, I think.
I remember being disappointed. I thought it was more fun when I knew there was some monster that was wreaking havoc and you didn't get to see it, and then when we got to see it, I was like, oh, well, okay.
He's just a little guy.
Yeah, he's a little guy.
I like the fact that they showed him. Because I've brought this up before, I have a lot of gripes about found footage, and you don't always need to show me shit, but when I don't want to just see fucking shaky camera footage and shit the whole movie,
Right.
That's why I hate the Blair Witch Project.
I know. And I love it.
I'll say I don't love all of the Blair Witch Project, but that to me has the most disturbing thing ever in a movie, and it's just one person screaming.
Yeah.
That woman's scream has stayed with me to this day, and I've only seen that movie like twice.
Yeah.
For the record, I am now, for the rest of my life, going to refer to taking a straight shot at something as going for the tentacle.
I didn't even realize that I was up on the soapbox here.
and Inky should take that one very personally.
Yeah, no shit, You're overusing the tentacles. We like the representation, but come on now, it's getting a little bit much.
Yeah, instead of jumping the shark, you went straight for the tentacle.
Went straight for the tentacle. Yeah, so other last thing I had, it was just a quote from the book early on, but I think wraps up a lot of what we've been talking about, even about the film. And it goes something like this. The beauty of it cannot be understood either, and when you see beauty in desolation, it changes something inside of you. Desolation tries to colonize you. So
I like it. I think I really need to read the book. I think that it will do me some good to read the book and kind of explore this universe a little bit more, and maybe see what the sequels have to offer. Even though I know this is just about the first one, but yeah, I think it's inspired me to do that, and I think that taking in Alex Garland's work, I'm certainly excited for the third part of the Alex Garland arc, Men, which this is the one that I'm going into completely blind. I know very little about the plot and anything about what happens. So I'm very much excited to getting to his most recent release.
That's prior to the Alex Garland arc, Men was the only one that I'd actually seen.
And this will be my first time with Men.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Also my first time with Men. I hope they're gentle. But with that in mind, guys, I feel like we covered it well enough. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of topics that we could continue to riff on. But A, the interest of time, and B, I know that we've been kind of up against it from a technical standpoint. So I think that we did the job that we could do. But I'm very interested in posting these articles up attached to this YouTube video. Inky, if you could share the ones that you have as well. And SR, I saw that you already shared your video that you had talked about earlier from the YouTube channel that explains the biology of things. So we're just going to link all that shit and let people have access to all of these things that influenced our conversation today about Annihilation. As always, we very much appreciate all of you for coming and giving us a listen. We encourage you to interact with us at screensermonpod@gmail.com. Send us your feedback, your suggestions, movies that you think we should review, things like that. We want that. So, I've made we did this on the chat, the Screen Sermon chat that we have to talk about scheduling and shit like that. I told Josh that when we do the 96th Oscars in the spring, assuming that they happen with the SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes, if we do an Oscar pick'em, if there's going to be an Oscars show, we're going to do an Oscars pick'em, and we're going to do an Oscars wrap-up show. So we're going to do a pre and a post. If I beat if I beat the SR unit in points at the Oscars, I get to continue putting off watching House until at least next year's Oscars after that. If he outscores me, then we will review House on the show.
See, you offer this, and now you're going to get another competitor, because you know Jay's going to have to join to get you to watch fucking Burn Notice.
Look, he tried that, and I'll tell you, I gave it a fair shot, okay? I watched the first 11 episodes of season 1, and I finally hit the point where I was like, I can't fucking do this anymore. This sucks. So, I did give it a chance. I didn't just give it one episode. I didn't just read synopses. I watched probably 10 hours worth of that show, and that's all I needed to see to know that I didn't need to see the rest. And this guy, he's sitting there telling me, like, well, when it gets to, like, season 3 and 4, it's really good. It's like, that's a lot of shit to watch before it starts getting good.
Yeah, that's never a good sign. If it takes more than one season, I'm out.
Yeah.
Or, fuck it, I'll just skip to that season.
Right. So yeah, folks, please interact with us via email at screensermonpod@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Send us some feedback, some suggestions, things like that. Comment on the videos, like and subscribe. I know that that's what people on YouTube are supposed to say, so I'm going to say it. And man, don't forget, Tubi TV, man. Tubi TV is awesome. Tubi TV is going to continue to be super useful and an awesome platform for this show. I advise everybody that can hear the sound of our voices on this show to please go create an account with Tubi TV. They've got such great content over there. Shout out to them. Tubi TV, we love you. And we will continue to support your brand, whether you necessarily asked us to or not. We just will. So, thanks very much, Inky, and thanks very much, SR, for coming on. I'm sorry about our technical issues, and hopefully we will continue to clean them up and get better week after week. So maybe try some different things next week. So thanks a bunch, guys. I appreciate you being on with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, it was a fun one.
All right, folks, have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week for City of God.